So today we're building an AI relationship coach, and I used Base 44 to build the entire tool. You know how sometimes when you're trying to evaluate a relationship, someone will tell you, take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle, write down all the pros of being with this person on one side and all the cons on the other. Well, think of this app as a much smarter, ongoing version of that, except you don't have to sit down and try to remember everything yourself. You just talk to it. You tell it how you met, how long you've been together, what the relationship was like in the beginning, what has changed, the arguments you've had, the things you love about this person, the things that frustrate you, the situations that keep happening. Basically, you build the history of your relationship just by having conversations with it. And as that history grows, the AI helps you analyze your relationship over time. It can help you identify recurring patterns. It can point out things that keep happening that you may not be paying attention to. It can help you understand what the actual strengths of the relationship are, what the biggest concerns are, and more importantly, why those concerns matter. Because sometimes when you're inside a relationship, you're looking at individual incidents. We argued on Monday. He did this last month. She said this yesterday. But when you put 2 or 3 years of those experiences together, you might suddenly realize wait, this isn't an isolated incident. This is a pattern. And that's really what we're trying to build here, a tool that helps you step outside of the relationship for a moment and look at the bigger picture. Now, here's where I think this gets even more interesting from a business perspective. If you're already a relationship coach, marriage counselor, therapist, premarital counselor, or you run relationship and marriage programs through an organization or church, this could become another arm of what you already do because you don't have to build my version of this app. You can build your version. Your AI can ask the questions you normally ask. It can follow your counseling framework. It can use your exercises, your approach to relationships, your methodology, and the principles you already teach your clients. And that means you could potentially take a service that currently depends heavily on your time and create an additional subscription based digital service around it. Maybe your clients see you once a week, but they use your relationship companion throughout the week to journal, document situations, complete exercises, and prepare for their next session. Or maybe you create a lower cost subscription for people who aren't ready for one on one coaching but still want access to your framework and resources. So you're not necessarily replacing what you already do, you're productizing part of your knowledge and you're creating something that could allow you to support more people without your business being completely limited by the number of hours you personally have available. That's what this Building for the Non-Technical Founder series is really about. Taking knowledge, experience, or even a simple business idea and asking, can I turn this into a useful piece of software? And then actually building it without being a traditional software developer. So let me show you exactly what I built with Base 44, how the relationship coach works, and how I prompted it to behave. So let's get into it. We're going to take the prompt that I already created and paste it into Base 44. One thing I recommend is to always plan before you build. So start with plan mode first, let it understand and structure what you're trying to build, and then move into build mode. Once you start building, it's going to take a couple of minutes, usually around 10 to 15 minutes or even less, depending on what you're building. Once the app is ready and shows up on the screen, the next step is very important. Test the app. You want to make sure it's actually doing exactly what you asked it to do. Now, looking at mine, there are already a few things I can see that aren't perfect. For example, I'm not completely happy with the font. And that's something you need to remember when you're building with AI. You have to review what it gives you. Even when your original instructions are detailed, it might misunderstand something or completely leave out a feature you requested. I'm going to show you an example here. While I was testing this app, I realized it had omitted something I specifically asked for. So I went back, explained what was missing, and asked it to add that feature. And here's something I recommend when you're making corrections. Even if you can explain the correction in normal language, take what you want changed and ask ChatGPT to turn it into a proper detailed prompt for you. Then paste that prompt back into base 44. You can continue making changes using natural language, but sometimes it may not capture as much of your instruction as you want. A structured prompt gives it much clearer instructions. So now let's actually test the app. I personally like to publish the app first so I can access it properly from a user's perspective. And you'll notice I never actually gave the app a name in my original prompt, so it chose a name for me. Now let's test it. Remember, this app is supposed to start by asking me questions about myself and the history of my relationship. For this test, I've created a fictional relationship history and entered that information into the app. And from that information, it has generated a relationship health assessment. In this example, the relationship health score is 5.1 out of 10. But what's more interesting is that it doesn't just give you a number, it breaks the relationship down across different areas like trust, shared goals, emotional safety, physical intimacy, emotional intimacy, conflict resolution, family, communication, finances, and respect. And then it gives recommendations based on the information you've provided. That's essentially the idea behind the app. The more information you're giving it about the relationship, the more context it has to help you identify patterns and understand what's actually happening over time. Then we have the journal. This allows you to keep track of what's happening in the relationship over time instead of trying to remember everything later. We also have goals. So maybe you and your partner decide you want to go on a date every week. Maybe you want to take a trip together. Maybe you're working on improving communication. You can create those goals inside the app and then track your progress. And obviously, you can add or remove different features depending on the type of relationship product you're trying to build. Now, while testing mine, I noticed another problem. It hadn't properly added the feature I requested for voice input and uploads. I also realized I needed conversation history. I had already had conversations with the AI, but when I returned to the dashboard, I couldn't easily find those previous conversations. So I went back to ChatGPT, explained exactly what was missing, and asked it to create an additional feature update prompt for me. That prompt included voice input, uploads, and a recent conversation section. I copied that new prompt, pasted it back into base 44, and now we're waiting for the updated version to build. While we're waiting, if you watched my previous video, I went through more of the base 44 interface. I showed you things like logs, settings, changing your logo, what the different features mean, and how you can start configuring your app. You can also connect your own domain. So if you're actually trying to launch this as a product, you might want your app running on your own domain rather than the default base 44 URL. You could also eventually integrate payments with something like Stripe if you're planning to charge users for access. For example, you could turn something like this relationship app into a subscription product. At the moment, I'm using the $20 plan because I build a lot of these examples. If you're building something that you actually want to push as a product, you may need one of the higher plans depending on the features you need. The amount you're able to build will also depend on how many credits your individual projects consume. A more complicated app will obviously use more credits than a very simple one. Okay, our new version is available now, and immediately you can see some of the features we asked it to add. We now have new conversation, we have recent chats. So now a user can actually return to previous conversations instead of losing the history of everything they've discussed with the relationship coach. I can also change the theme. I didn't actually give base 44 specific brand colors when I created this, so it made those design decisions for me. Even the name Aura wasn't something I came up with. The AI chose that itself. But if you're building this as a serious product, you can customize all of that. You could go into Chat GPT and say, I'm building an AI relationship coaching app. Give me a complete UI direction, brand identity, and color palette for this product. Take those brand colors and design instructions and tell Base 44 to customize the existing app around them, and it can make those changes for you. So now we basically have our application. We've got our conversations, goals, insights, and the other features we originally requested. And remember, you don't have to keep my exact structure. You can rename things like timeline, journal, or insights based on what makes the most sense for the audience you're trying to serve. And if you're already a relationship coach, marriage counselor, therapist, or someone working in this space, this is where you can make the product much more personal. You can take the prompts I've provided and tweak them around your own methodology, your own experience, and the way you already work with your clients. That's really the point of building tools like this. You're not just copying an app, you're taking the idea and asking, how can I make this useful for my own audience or business? All right, that's it for this build. If you have any questions about the build or things like connecting your domain, let me know. And I'll see you in the next one.